In section 2.8, we're going to talk about two variable inequalities. So today we're going to be graphing absolute value equations again, except now we're also going to include inequality aspect of it. So graphing above or below and shading. So before we get into that, let's just recap from Algebra 1. If I was graphing y is greater than x, I would make a dashed line because I want to include everything greater than x but not equal to x, so I don't necessarily want to include the line. And then I want to shade above it because it's greater than. Here I see y is less than x. So similarly, I stay as a dashed line because I want everything that's less than x but not equal to x, and I shade everything below it. Next, we see y is greater than or equal to x. So I want everything greater than x, so I shade above. I also want to include the line, so I make it a solid line. Finally, I have y is less than or equal to x. So I want to shade below, and I want to make a solid line because I want to include x. One quick thing to go over before we move on into the absolute values. Something that I like to do to remember how to graph above or below. I remember my high school math teacher taught me this, and for whatever reason it always stuck with me. If you're not sure of where to shade above or below on certain lines, you could think of the line as a roller coaster. So if you really want to, you could draw a person on a roller coaster. Here below I see y is greater than or equal to 1/2 x plus 1. If I want to shade above, I would want to shade above the roller coaster. So I'll go up here. Same thing on the other side. I have y is less than or equal to 2 minus 3x. Again, thinking of this as a roller coaster. Below it, I would want to shade below the roller coaster, below the tracks. Alright, moving on to actually graphing an inequality. Here I have y is greater than 3x minus 1. So this is going to be the same thing like what we did before, where we're graphing the line. The only thing that we're adding is asking ourselves, do we have a dashed or solid line, and should I shade above or below? So here, this is basically in slope-intercept form. My y-intercept is at -1, so I'll plot that point here. And then my slope is 3, so I'm going to count up 3 over 1. Up 3 over 1. Since this is y is greater than, I'm going to make a dashed line. And since it's greater than, I'm going to want to shade above that line. And I'm done. Next, let's take a look at how we would include an inequality for an absolute value in here. So here I want to graph the equation 1 minus y is less than the absolute value of x plus 2. So the first thing that you want to do when solving any of these equations is to make sure that the y is by itself. In that last problem that we did, the y was by itself, so we were good to go. Here I have a 1 minus y on the other side, so I kind of want to get y alone first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. Now I still have a negative y, so to get rid of that negative, I could multiply both sides by -1. That's going to change the sign, and it's also going to flip the sign because I'm multiplying by a negative number. So I'm going to be left with y is greater than negative x plus 2 plus 1. So from here, I'm going to be able to determine what my vertex is and what my a value is. My vertex in this problem is going to be -2, 1. And my a value, or my slope, is going to be -1. So I'm going to plot -2, 1. And then for my a value, I'm going to go down 1 over 1 on both sides. And I'm going to make it a dashed line because it's y is greater than, not greater than or equal to. And finally, I'm going to ask myself, should I shade above or below? This is greater than, so I'm going to shade above the v. And, there you go. And I'm done.